Greetings, this is Ruby Powers with Powers Law Group, immigration law firm, full service firm here in Houston, Texas with a small office in northern New Jersey. It is Friday, March 8th, 2019 at really close to 3 p.m. Central Time. And I know you're probably thinking, hey, I'm about to go on spring break, but you know, we're here for you. We're giving you information on what you might have missed in the world of immigration this week. So, wow, there's so much that's happened again. But also, happy International Women's Day. Such a great cause, and we're really excited. And we know a lot of you are at rodeo or getting ready for spring break, so we'll try to be as brief as we can. So there's still the continued Remain in Mexico policy. Trump's quietly expanding a crackdown on asylum seekers. The administration's latest effort to repel asylum seekers has been quietly successful, and now it's quietly expanding. So when I was leaving Tijuana in December, they announced it was like December 20th. And then the day, or it was right after the shutdown was ending, they actually started unveiling it and enforcing the Remain in Mexico, which meant that people who had waited their turn to go across the border at a port of entry would be processed briefly on the U.S. side and then sent back to Mexico where they'd have to wait for their hearing. And oh, by the way, you can always ask questions on our Facebook Live or give us a call at 713-589-2085. So they had opened this up, the Remain in Mexico policy, in the Tijuana border initially, and then they have been on expanding it at other ports of entry. And so from January 25th to February 28th, only about 150 people were returned from San Ysidro, according to preliminary statistics. But, you know, and then, you know, one of my biggest concerns is their safety. Two big major concerns. One is their safety in Mexico while they're waiting, and two is their access to legal counsel, competent, experienced legal counsel who's knowledgeable of U.S. immigration laws. And so I am against Remain in Mexico policy for those reasons. So moving over to some happy news. In March yesterday, the Ninth Circuit Appeals Court grants more protections for asylum seekers. The Federal Appeals Court ruled on Thursday, so yesterday, that immigration authorities can no longer swiftly deport asylum seekers who fail an initial screening, opening the door for thousands of migrants a year to get another shot in federal courts to win an asylum. After dropping precipitously over 5 decades, the number of migrants intercepted at the southern border, the key indicator of how many undocumented people are entering the U.S., is soaring again, driven by an influx of families from Central America fleeing violence and poverty. So really the numbers had been really low, and they've just been going up a little bit, but they're still at historic lows. President Trump has said the migrants are exploiting the asylum system by making baseless and fraudulent claims in order to stay in the United States. So this opinion extends constitutional habeas corpus guarantees to those applying for asylum at the border and provides that they can seek a hearing in the federal courts before summarily deported, though the court did not specify the standards of the courts used to evaluate. So ruling applies to state seekers in 5 states, California, Arizona, Washington, Oregon, and Hawaii. Well, I wish it was in Texas, but, you know, we will find out. Maybe we can get some more protections if that moves up and can reach more states. So there's been a lot of news about processing times taking longer with immigration. And I remember at one point in my, I've been practicing a little over 10 years now, that a green card, marriage-based green card interview would take only 3 months. I forgot what year that was. Now we're up to around 24 months, taking 2 years. And that's just one example, but there's a lot more cases taking a lot longer. A couple weeks ago, American Immigration Lawyers Association came out with a report and just basically saying, with other news, and they basically were mentioning this is like an invisible wall. It's keeping people from being able to have a legal status because the processing is taking so long. So they say that there's increased delays. The newly implemented policy changes that focused on extreme vetting of the visa applicants are likely contributing to some of the steep jumps in processing times. The key takeaways from these recent announcements or updates about the wait time is that the processing delays are likely to persist as USCIS grapples with changing priorities and an increased workload. Employers and employees may want to plan ahead and be mindful of upcoming expiration dates. Employers may find it useful to file for immigration benefits as soon as permitted. Processing can be expedited for a fee. That depends if you're eligible for premium processing. I think the other thing that I wanted to mention, because I've been gone for a lot of the last few Fridays, was that one of the USCS meetings I went to, they told us that there's going to be a lot more likelihood of getting notices, RFEs, requests for evidence, notice of intent to deny, and denials. And then for 485 or green card adjustment interviews, if it's going to a denial, they'll be more likely of having that notice to appear ready, just waiting for that person not to respond, not to appeal or not reaffile, and so that they'll be more quickly sent off to court. And jurisdiction shifts from USCIS to EOIR. That was the way it was several years ago. I can't remember again what year that was, but and for the longest time we would warn clients to be careful and file quickly. But for many years it wasn't the case, and now it is going to be now. So I really think what we're going to see a lot more is people who might have filed on their own or they might have gone to someone who helped them out and they weren't an attorney. And then if they get into a situation where the case is getting a little bit more complicated, our firm, and I would suggest to go to a very experienced immigration attorney to review, because you don't have a lot of time. And if you don't act, it could easily be put in immigration court. And there it gets a lot more complicated. But our firm prides itself in being good at complicated cases and being able to work quickly if needed. So in other news, which is good news, so 24 senators have asked President Trump to protect Venezuelans and give them a temporary protected status. So we have TPS for several countries like Nepal and like Somalia, Syria, Honduras, El Salvador. There's a lot of them, but we don't have it for Venezuela, which a lot of people have been thinking. Things have been deteriorating since 2004 onward, and a lot in light of what's been happening in the news the last week or two. So 23 Democratic and 1 Republican senator asked President Trump for protection for Venezuelan citizens for TPS. They've moved to discontinue. So the Trump administration has been discontinuing most of these TPS programs, actually. A lot of them have expiration date coming up. And remember, in El Salvador's case, there was litigation to keep that one open, even though it was intended to end later on this fall. So TPS is granted to countries ravaged by natural disasters or war and let citizens of those countries remain in the U.S. until the situation improves. So right now there's around 300,000 people with TPS, and around 200 or so thousand are from El Salvador. Many people who might have come from Venezuela might have entered on a tourist visa and overstayed, or maybe they applied for asylum and are somewhere in the process of waiting for an interview or being put in immigration court. They could also be on other statuses like student, which can get costly if they run out of sources of funds. So I think that would be a wise decision to move to TPS for Venezuelans, to give them a chance for the country to get organized and get in a better place. And because we've done it for a lot of other countries before, the people that have been in the U.S., and I think that would be in line with what we've done in the past. And then what really affects me closely, having seen friends and contacts being targeted, according to the New York Times, and this has also been in other sources, the U.S. tracked activists and journalists as migrant caravans headed to the border. The administration created a list of activists and journalists whom they subjected to additional scrutiny when they entered the U.S. After an internal government document, the administration faced criticism after an internal document was leaked. It suggested that immigrant activists and journalists were specifically singled out for extra screening at border points by the U.S. and Mexican governments. So there were lawyers and journalists. There was even ministers that were on this list, and it was found out by the NBC7 in San Diego. a freelance photographer on the list who has worked to appear in the Times was barred from entering Mexico on January 17th while she was en route to photograph another caravan of migrants traveling. And this also happened to members of the El Otro Lado team. And so I think this is appalling, and we need the media to be out there as the free press to document what is happening, and we need immigration attorneys and other activists to be there to help fight for people's rights. And so that is very disturbing. So in other news, I will be traveling to Austin for our Texas Day of Action with the American Immigration Lawyers Association, where we'll be discussing with state representatives and senators about bills that impact immigrants and that have some connection to immigration. And so we have a team of about 35 attorneys that will be going. I'm really excited, and we'll be sharing photos and videos of that day. I was there a week or two ago to work on education reform, and there has been a recent bill, HB 3, and so that was recently released on Tuesday. And I'll be traveling to D.C. for National Day of Action with Ayla and later on in April, and some other conferences coming up. Again, today is International Women's Day, so let's celebrate women internationally. And if you ever have questions about immigration, want a consultation, we're here at 713-589-2085, and our New Jersey number is 201-210-8240. I'm been traveling a lot. I was at the ABA Tech Show working on technology and improvement for the firm, as well as working on the law practice management book that will be published by Ayla in June. And so that's why I've been gone the last few Fridays, different trips. I also toured the U.S. consulate a few weeks ago in Juarez, and then I also spoke at the Vegas conference about law practice management. So catching up, but I am in the office more now. But we have a great team here. So if you have any questions, give us a call. Check us out online, and hope you have a great and safe weekend. Take care.